You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. My name is Steve Adams, or Mighty Blue, and you are listening to episode 367 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. This week, with more of our Mighty Blue Class of 23 actually on or just about to hit the trail, as well as the story of George Stephanos' AT hike in the 1980s, we're bringing a different trail to you again with our first guest. A few months ago, we had a Brit, Andy Hood, sharing his story of the Southwest Coast Path in the UK and how he ran a section of it. Well, that more than piqued my interest. I kind of wondered out loud what the trail would be like to hike, and Andy responded by putting me in touch with today's guest, Rachel Hadley-Leonard. Rachel was actually doing her hike of the Southwest Coast Path at the time, and once she was done, of course, I got in touch with her. She tells a great story of the path, and I think you're going to really enjoy hearing from her. After Rachel, we have our Bostonian from Australia. Steve Nota started the AT last year and had so many interruptions to his hike that he's come back from Australia this year to complete it. He's a great guy, and we'll be hearing from him soon. Then Mary Marks is back on. Mary and her dog Wiley started fairly early, and she's already 400 miles into it, proving, if ever proof was needed, that this race goes to the slow and steady. We'll hear from Mary after Steve. Our series with Dr. Lynn is over, but I did get a couple of questions that I put to her, and I'm going to read the answers out to you between interviews. Finally, then the hail came, finds George almost desperate to get home to Connecticut to recharge his failing batteries. So let's get on. Here's Rachel Hadley-Leonard. This week, we head back across the Atlantic. Several months ago, we had Andy Hood as our guest on the show. He was running part of the Southwest Coast Path. And of course, as soon as he started talking about there being a path, I immediately wanted to know more what it was like as a hike. Mm-hmm. And Andy suggested I should contact Rachel Hadley-Leonard, who was actually walking the path at that time. So here's Rachel. Hey, Rachel, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and have a chat with you.
Now, you're very welcome to be on here. Sadly, listeners, we're not going to be providing subtitles as we're both speaking English, and you may not understand either of us because, well, we'll see how it goes, you know. As I said, Andy suggested I talk with you as you're fresh off hiking the Southwest Coast Path. Let's start with a few facts and figures as far as you can remember them. You know,
Sure.
How long has it been a trail and that sort of stuff, and how long is it?
Absolutely. So the trail is 630 miles long, which is, I think, just over 1,000 kilometres. So that might kind of sound more impressive.
It's almost exactly 1,000 kilometres, isn't it? It's about 1,010 or something.
Something like that. And of course, that sounds pretty impressive. And the other impressive stat about the trail, the hike, is that it's in completing the through hike, or even if you do it in stages, I guess, you will have summited Everest from sea level 4 times. So it's considerable elevation.
Yeah. Well, you know, that compares it's very similar then to the AT, which is, it's 16 times Mount Everest and about 4 times as long. But so in like for like, so it is that sort of climb. And most of the climbing, it is a path. It's not rock scrambling and things like that, is it?
No, it's not. It is a path. I mean, one photograph that I've got springs to mind of me. There's a section between St Ives and a place called Zena, heading towards Land's End. And that is, the path just disappears. The path, it doesn't, it's there, but you are scrambling over boulders. But that's the only section where you're doing that. The rest of the time, it's a very well marked, very clear path, and there's no climbing as such involved at all. No, it's a hike, it's a path.
But elevation gain is elevation gain, isn't it?
Yeah. Brutal, literally brutal. And I had no idea. I was prepared. I thought I was prepared. I trained a lot, but it's brutal. There are days that are just, beyond brutal.
And your Instagram name is Keeping the Sea on the Right. So by definition, knowing my British geography, I'm going to describe it in a minute to our American friends. Keeping the Sea on the Right literally means you are walking, I suspect then, from the north
Correct.
down to Land's End, and then you turn left.
That's
and
right.
you still got the sea on your right going to, where does it end up, by the way?
It ends up near just this side, just shy of Poole in Dorset. So,
right. And is that normally the way it's done from north to south? So I seem to think, because Andy went that way as well. I'm just wondering if that's the more traditional way to do it.
It's a good question. It is the traditional way to do it, and there is a reverse guide, as there are with lots of trails. But the main guide is the way that I did it, keeping the sea on my right. And for me, that was kind of important because I just loved, I went to the bit I loved the most first, or what I thought I loved the most first. And I just enjoyed doing it that way.
Now, we were talking before we started recording. You said, I'm not going to share who you're talking with, but you said that someone didn't want to name their favourite part. So what was initially your favourite part then that you thought was going to be your favourite part?
Well, I thought my favourite part was going to be the bit I knew the best, and that is North Cornwall. So you start in Somerset, you then go through North Devon, and then you go into North Cornwall. And I've been going there for 30, 40 years. So I just thought that would be my favourite bit because I knew it so well. And it's beautiful, it's stunning. There's an area called the Seven Bays, which is a little bit flatter than the rest as well, so maybe that's why I liked it. But that I thought would be my favourite. But in the end, there were almost too many favourites to choose from. And even areas that I also thought I knew really well, it turns out I didn't know them that well at all.
You know what? It's funny, you believe you know a place. I know a lot of people who hike the AT and the PCT and things like that, and they read so much about it. They go down the YouTube rabbit hole, and they have an expectation when they set out. But a through hike is so different to a day hike, isn't it?
Completely. So
talk to us about that.
I mean, it's everything. It's everything from the physicality is different to the mentality. I guess that both of those things, they're the two main things, and it's mindset really. It's setting off knowing that you're in it for the long haul. So but I think in a way, that makes it better, or for me it made it better because it made it more manageable in terms of expectations. So I was absolutely blessed with good weather. In 56 days, I was only in waterproofs for 5 of those days, which is, this is England we're talking about, right?
For England, that's a bloody miracle.
We're talking about. It is an absolute miracle. So that was astonishing. However, I was completely geared up for any weather mentally because I just thought, well, it's not as if I can pick my day for walking. I'm just in it for the long haul. And very quickly, and I'm sure you found this as well, you get into a rhythm. And you get into a rhythm definitely. Within the first week that just then stays with you. You've got a routine.
Took me about a month, but yeah.
I was halfway round by a month, so I had to get in it quite quickly. But and so that rhythm was really important. But of course, there is the physical side of it as well, which is demanding. It's tough on the old body.
Yes, and
my old body.
Well, you like me are not in the first flush of youth,
but
you're more first flush than I am.
No, not by so much.
So, how was it physically for you? Because as you mentioned, the number of times you go up Mount Everest. So, what did you feel like when you finished it? And we're going to talk about the hike itself in a minute. But when you actually finished it, were you beaten up?
Do you know what was astonishing? I've actually got early stage arthritis, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to do it now. I did it, I was 55. I've just turned 56. I was 55 when I did it. And I wanted to do it because I didn't know how quickly or how bad my arthritis was going to get. Right. But I can honestly say this, hand on heart, other than when I was 20, 25 years old, I never felt better physically than when I finished. It was unbelievable. Wow. It was astonishing. I weighed less. I probably lost almost a stone, and I didn't really have a stone to lose.
14 pounds.
Oh, sorry, 14 pounds. In fact, I think I lost about 10 pounds actually, and I didn't really have that to lose. But that aside, and it just meant I could eat all over Christmas. Thanksgiving. But it meant that. But I was better. I was just everything. My arthritis was so much better. I felt fitter. I felt well. I felt I had energy. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
So coming back to your normal day-to-day life, did you carry on eating like most of us do once you get into this eating like a condemned man thing or condemned woman thing? So were you able to sort of get back to normal?
Yeah, quite quickly. I mean, it did take a while. There's a lot of things, as I'm sure you'll
So the arthritis
relate
started
to.
up again?
It did. It did. It absolutely did.
gosh.
Within probably a month, I started to get, particularly in my hands and a little bit in my knees, all the old aches and pains. But it's funny, isn't it, what happens when you come back? I mean, the very first thing that I did was I looked at my wardrobe and I thought, why? Why have I got all these clothes? It's ridiculous. I only need 2 outfits for the whole of my life. Why have I got these clothes? And then systematically started giving them to charity.
Well, one thing, my listeners know this well of me. I've said quite a few times, is one of the things on the trail, you have so few choices.
Yeah.
And having so few choices makes it so much easier, doesn't it?
Life is
I go
easier.
into I go into my closet now. I mean, not that I've got any not decent clothes particularly, but I've got a whole lot of not very decent clothes. You know, I've got tons of them, and you just don't need them at all. It's remarkable.
Absolutely.
So let's find out why you got into this. How long have you actually been hiking the path? I think you referred to it earlier on. You've been doing it for some time.
Well, I've been visiting the area that the path stretches from and to for many, many years. You know, since early adulthood, really. I was a Scotland hiker when I was a child, because that's where I was taken by my parents. But as an early adult, I started going down to the southwest, and it was less hiking, although I have always hiked. You know, I was hiking in South America, Machu Picchu, the Inca Trail, when I was in my early 20s.
Nice. Right.
But it was less hiking, more just visiting. I'm almost ashamed to say, but not. You know, everyone can be a tourist as well.
Cool.
But I fell in love with that area and the remoteness and ruggedness. I guess that was born out of a love for very remote Scotland. And if you go to parts of Devon, Exmoor, Cornwall, out of season, it can be very rugged and very remote. You don't want to go July and August.
Yeah, exactly. So when did you actually do your 56 days? When did you start? When did you finish?
I did that. I started on the 4th of September and I finished on the 29th of October. So,
my birthday. In fact, my
there you
70th
go.
birthday.
There you go. Yeah, so big. Oh, I was celebrating with you because I had a big celebration that day. I had a really lovely meeting. What do you call it? There's a greeting party. I can't think of the word I want to use. But there was a really good welcoming party. That's the expression. Yeah. And so we partied. We partied very well.
So the trail itself, is that a good time to go? Because you've had a really hot summer this year, didn't you? And I know your summer, you had an Indian summer as well, didn't you? You just kind of came back. Were you quite warm when you were out there most of the time?
No, it was, well, yes, I was, but not overly so. It was the perfect time to go. The association, the charity and the guide book kind of recommends that you go either April, May, June-ish or September, October, edging into November. They're the best 2 times to go. But for me, I lucked out massively because, like you say, we had an Indian summer, which meant that it was beautiful weather, but fantastic walking conditions. You know, I was walking in degrees Celsius, probably about anywhere between 15 and 22 every day. It was perfect.
That's 68 to about 72. No, that's not. 15 is 60. Right. No, 15 is about 60, isn't it?
Okay.
So, I don't know. Or 59. 15 is 59 because 50 is 10.
Okay.
I know that.
Okay.
So, yeah. What could we do Fahrenheit over here?
Yeah.
And do you tend to hike alone? I know you were alone for much of that trip, obviously. Do you tend to prefer being alone?
I do. I do completely prefer to hike alone. It's you know, life is busy, isn't it? And I've got 2 kids. They're grown up now. I've got a husband. But life is very busy, and I work full time. I run my own consultancy business, so I'm always around people, and I love people. I'm a complete social animal, which is bizarre that I then love hiking alone.
No, it's not bizarre at all. I entirely understand that. I think a lot of people relate to that. Sometimes you're just surrounded by too many damn people.
Yeah.
You know, COVID unfortunately has destroyed that for a lot of us. You know, we aren't surrounded by so many people. But in your case, if you're consulting, you've got clients, you've got kids, you've got family, all that sort of stuff, it's nice to have a break and get away every now and then. And I noticed, I saw an article, actually an interview on TV on your Instagram, about, you say this place makes you the person you're supposed to be.
Yeah, that was the TV article. It was BBC.
Yeah, I know. So what do your family think about you saying that? Without them, you're the person you're supposed to be.
That's a really good question. Do you know what? Not one of them has commented on that. Maybe they felt it was the wrong thing to comment on it. But I just feel it's who I am. By being by the sea, I mean, if they were there as well, that's fine. But being by the sea, being at the coast,
that must make it feel even better.
I was going to say, I think I've just made it a whole lot worse. But I love being on my own. And do you know what was really weird? Probably about 3 or 4 months into the hike, weeks into the hike, I realised that whenever I came to a village or a town, I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. And people and traffic in particular started to irritate me. Just felt like you've no right to be here. This is my hike and it's my path.
Of course, I understand that entirely as well, because you don't, when you're hiking, you're hiking in places where traffic sort of shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But I suppose knowing the West Coast, and I certainly know Devon, a bit of Cornwall and so on, and Torquay and places like that in Devon, you can't avoid having to go through town. So the logistics, I suppose, on this particular hike are dead easy. You must pass through a town at least once a day, don't you?
You pass through a village almost every day.
Sorry. That's even better, actually, passing through a village than through a town.
Yeah, absolutely. Towns, not so much. The second half of the trail, once you've turned the corner at Land's End and started to come back towards Devon, South Devon, you hit quite a lot of towns then, and that really is a town a day. But there are stretches where you don't see civilization much, and then when you do, it's a real shock. But I think that whole being on your own piece. Someone said to me, "What did you think about all day?" And I said, "You know what? There were days when I hardly thought at all. It was the best form of meditation. I was just in the moment." And that is something I struggle to do in my normal home life. I struggle to meditate. I struggle to be in the moment because it's too busy. So
chucking your family under the bus again, by the way.
They are. I know. I am. Bless them. I do love them to bits. If you're listening, Charlie, Emma, I love you to bits.
So the logistics of it, you can go and get something in town whenever you like, basically, can't you? Or in a village, rather. You can go, you're never going to have to carry too much between stops, I presume, are you?
Usually. That is usually the case. I would say probably in about 85% of cases, or of days, that's the case. It was strange because the food that I wanted to eat, which became very predictable and very boring, I couldn't always source in every village. But, it was...
All right. I would have thought it'd be a great pub crawl, a bit like doing the Camino, frankly.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I did treat myself at the end of every day, or whenever I finished that particular section of hike, I bought myself half a lager, half a what I don't know what the equivalent of that would be in the States, but half a beer. A small beer.
Half a bud.
Bottle of bud,
yeah.
And that was my treat to myself. But I did eat out most evenings in a pub or a cafe or something.
And did you stop in town, or did you village town? But I'm saying stop in a community somewhere. Did you tend to stop in communities overnight, or did you camp? I mean, is there camping possible on the trail?
Well, that's a really good question, and there's just been a massive court case about camping, wild camping on Exmoor. I don't know if you saw it in the news, but there are lots of marches going on about that at the moment because some of the landowners are sort of refusing the right to wild camp. And actually, in the UK, in England, not the UK, in England, there is no automatic right to wild camp, but people do. People wild camp, and if you're a hiker, you are so mindful of nature that you're good about that. You clear up after yourself. You leave no trace, as we all know. We should. Yeah. But in the main, I stayed in communities, and I did do a bit of camping, but I did a bit of everything else as well. From horse boxes, I stayed in a horse box one night. That was interesting.
Really?
It was a converted. Nice, yeah. Allegedly, it was a converted horse box, but all that meant is someone had put a bunk bed. The horse was not there, thankfully.
It could have been an added bonus. We stayed. I remember it. I've just remembered this. I've forgotten about it. When I hiked the AT in 2019, a bunch of us took an Airbnb for the night. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys, his girlfriend was coming along to meet him, and he'd organised a goat petting session. God, for his girlfriend. So I don't know how that's kind of a random thought that just came to me there. So your first few days on the trail, you say you've been hiking for some years anyway. Mm-hmm. Did it take you a while to get your trail legs? Because you said you got into the rhythm. Is that something that you found difficulty with, or was this just part of the thing of not hiking for several weeks and then suddenly hiking?
I mean, I had done a lot of training specifically for this hike. So, I walk anyway. I walk every single day. I walk I walk a minimum of 5 miles every day. And at the weekends, I probably try to walk at least 10 on one of the weekend days. So I'm fit and I'm used to walking, but I'm not used to walking those distances with that elevation every day. So the biggest problem for me was, everything hurt. Everything hurt for the first 10 days in ways I couldn't possibly imagine. And I did get the proverbial odd blister or two. I think I only had 2 for the whole walk. But yeah, everything hurt a lot. And actually, what was strange is after a week, one by one, things stopped hurting. And so I could focus on the next thing that hurt until I realised after about 2 weeks that nothing was hurting at all.
You'd run out.
I'd run out of aches.
You'd
and
run out of places to ache.
Exactly. I literally had. Literally, you name it, I ached there, yeah.
And is there a bit of a social scene, and I don't know how you can read that in different languages actually, is there a social community on the trail? Do you obviously meet other hikers. Yeah. Is there a bit of a sort of a culture, trail culture, like there is, for example, say the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail?
Knowing what I know about the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Trail, I've got my letters wrong there, words wrong, and I don't know that much about it, but I think it's less of a thing here on this trail, on this hike. So yeah, sure, you meet people, and when you meet people it's brilliant because then you've got that shared interest in common and people will always stop and talk to you. But people don't tend to congregate together in the evening. So for example, the West Highland Way in Scotland, because the places to stay are so limited on each stop, people are much more likely to congregate, and then it becomes a bit of a social thing. That didn't really happen, certainly not for me. And I know a lot of people who've hiked the trail now, and it doesn't really happen for them. It's kind of a more isolated experience, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did the West Highland Way myself last year. Actually, I did it in the first week of March.
Yeah.
But yeah, first night. Yeah, of April, rather, not March. Yeah, of April.
Yeah.
And I loved it. But I always found places to stay not too much of a problem. And you saying, and I'd imagine there will be more of a, not party scene, but more of a trail thing in villages or towns at night, because pubs are great meeting places, aren't they? And I thought that's where you'd all meet up.
They are, but certainly when I was there, I mean, I don't know, maybe everyone just saw me and ran, but it just didn't happen because I think at any one time, and this is where I know we were talking earlier, sort of off camera as it were, about, overuse of any particular trail. I don't think the South West Coast Path outside of July and August is in danger of that. There would be days when I didn't pass anyone at all. And
wow, I'm surprised.
Literally, I would say, well, I don't know, more than 5 days I didn't pass anyone at all. And then there'd be other days where I only met 1 or 2 people on the trail. So that was perfect for me. Now, I stayed in places, villages, communities where there were pubs, and I always frequented those pubs. And I got talking to people, but it was very rare I got talking to other hikers. They just weren't there. So it's not as I think the through hiking thing isn't as popular, particularly in those months. But it's the whole community of the trail itself is absolutely fantastic. That's a brilliant community. So there's a Facebook group, there's the association.
Yeah, sure.
And through my Instagram, Keeping the Sea on the Right, I've become part of my tribe. I've found my tribe, if you like. I wasn't actually meeting them, and sadly wasn't partying at night, although that's probably a good thing because that meant I could get up in the morning.
Yeah, the struggle might have been the following morning. I know what you mean, yeah.
Exactly.
So it not being a camping type trip,
yeah.
How much did you take in terms of your backpack? What were you carrying?
So I was carrying about 12 to 14 kilos, depending on water or not, obviously.
That's a lot. That's a heck of a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot, and it is a lot.
By the way, 12 kilos is about 26 point something pounds.
Yeah.
So you're carrying between 26 and 30 odd pounds. That's quite a lot for not camping.
It is, yeah. And I did try. I mean, 2 kilos of that were water.
Right, yeah.
You know, because, well, not at the end of the day. Those 2 kilos were gone. But, and it was a problem. So it was a problem I had to address as well. So I spent the first 10 days, and funnily enough, that's when the pain started to ease off. And it was too heavy. It was just too heavy, and I just couldn't do it. And in the end, I had a kind of hybrid mix of having a smaller pack, using a bit of luggage transfer service, which is something that you can do. There's an option to do that.
Like you can on the West Island Way as well, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can. And I did a whole hybrid of things. I had friends who came down to visit me occasionally, and they'd carry my kit on for me, or we'd divvy it up and so on. So Nice. It was a real hybrid of things. But it was. I think 9 or 10K is probably ideal, really.
Yeah.
Or under 10.
It strikes me. It did strike me quite a bit. Yeah. And would you take a dip in the sea when you're on the beach, by the way? Because I suppose September, because that water down there is pretty darn cold, even in the summer, isn't it?
Do you know, it's really funny because I've got friends who live in Australia, and I was telling them, so I had a dip in the sea pretty much every day, right up until the last week. Sometimes I had 2 dips in the sea. I love wild swimming. In the last week, which would have been the last week in October, it was getting cold. It was getting chilly. But the first week, in England, September is the warmest month for the sea out of all the months.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually...
You don't mean that. You mean it's the least cold month, don't you?
Well... Exactly, that would be the way of looking at it. But my friends in Australia, I'd give them the sea temperature, which would be about 16, 17 degrees Celsius. So I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, 50-something.
That 50 is 10, so it's about 62. That's pretty fresh.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's not fresh. It is fresh, but it's not freezing. And like I say, it's the warmest month. So I was in every day.
No, that's a lovely way to do it, I say.
We're talking turquoise waters. We're talking water that you can swim out 50 metres outwards and see 50 metres downwards. You know, I'm talking
Beautiful.
crystal clear turquoise water.
Are you walking on the beach much?
Not much at all, actually.
Does the trail go on the beach?
No, in fact, I'm thinking at my next trail, which, sorry if this is a spoiler alert and you were going to ask me about this, but no. I'm hoping to do the Fisherman's Trail in Portugal later in the year. And apparently there's quite a lot of beach walking on that, but there's almost none on the Southwest Coast Path. There are 2 or 3 sections of walking along a lot of beach, but apart from that, no. You're up on a cliff.
And now this is a complete side path. So the Fisherman's Trail, it's not the Portuguese sea route to the Camino, is it?
It's not. It does connect up to it at one point. It's the Rota, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, it's the Rota Vincentina, I believe it's called.
Easy for you to say.
Well, I think I've said it wrong. Someone's going to dial into you and correct me. And that trail is made up of 2 smaller trails, the Fisherman's Trail and the Historic Trail, and they both lead on to part of the Camino.
Oh, right, nice. Oh, I'd love to do somewhere in Portugal as well. So I mentioned this clip on Instagram where you're interviewed by the BBC, and there was this commentator there. He says that it costs to maintain the South West Coast Path £1,500 a year to maintain just 1 mile.
I know.
Now, the interviewer couldn't work out what that was, but I worked it out. It's just under £950,000 or £1 million a year per mile.
Yeah.
No, in total.
In total, yeah.
Which isn't a massive amount of money. I presume, though, that it's not government funded, is it? And if not, why not?
So this is the problem. And so the charity that I raised money for when I was hiking the path, the Southwest Coast Path Association, and in fact, that's the podcast that we've just launched. We can right. Talk about that 630 miles. That charity, it's their responsibility. Well, they maintain and look after the path. Now, you're absolutely right. No government funding whatsoever. So all of that has to come from donations, every single penny of it. And funnily enough, I was raising money for 3 charities when I did the hike. And it just so happened that I raised £1,446, I think it was, for the Southwest Coast Path. And that was £6 more than it takes to look after 1 mile. So the exact figure, I think, is 1,440. So I am what they call a mile maker, because I've effectively looked after that, paid to look after that path for that mile for one year.
That is so cool.
But yeah, why not? It should be, shouldn't it?
Oh, I would think so, yeah, because what government does and why it does it, I've no idea. This country or in the UK, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, I'll tell you.
But there's one sort of quite important point to make there, and that is that if your listeners want to listen to the first episode of 630 Miles, an audio journey, that's the full title, the director of the association, the director of the charity, I interview on the second part of the pod. And he talks about green prescriptions, and he talks about the NHS not being the National Health Service, but the Natural Health Service. And I think this is a fascinating concept about how, being in nature is therapeutic. We were talking about
Absolutely.
that earlier as well.
Yes.
And so, it should be government funded because, green prescriptions and walking and hiking is so good for you.
I agree with you, but as I think I said also when we spoke earlier, is there a danger then of more publicity, meaning that more people use it, which is great, but does that mean there's more damage? Because looking at the proximity of the trail sometimes to the sea, are there potential erosion issues coming down the pipe? Because if people use it more and more and more, it's going to get eroded. Or do they simply relocate it when it gets a little bit too close to the edge?
They do. It's a really, really good question. And literally 10 days ago, there was a huge fall at a place called West Bay, which is down on the Dorset coast, and a huge fall. There are big chunks of path constantly dropping into the sea all the time. It's phenomenal and tragic. But you're right. I mean, that is mainly weather erosion, but it is also the impact of people walking. So it's a fine balance, isn't it? You want everybody to get out and you want everybody to have the benefits of the path, but at the same time you kind of need people to tread carefully and tread lightly because you want to preserve the path. I mean, at the moment the path is moving in and in and in all the time, but the British Isles are getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah, well, I don't tread lightly, so I better not do it. I don't want to end up in the flipping Atlantic Ocean or whichever it is down there. And we mentioned the podcasts because, and this is being done in conjunction with the Southwest Coast Path Association, to celebrate their 50th anniversary, which I believe is this year, isn't it?
That's right.
50th anniversary this year, 23. Yeah. And you started that podcast, and then the first of the monthly episodes dropped at the end of January. So I can put a link in the show notes. I know it's currently only available on Spotify. I did actually, or maybe elsewhere, but I did also say earlier on to Rachel that perhaps you might consider putting it on Apple and so on to help people find it, because if people want to learn more about it, I think it'd be an interesting thing to learn about. But you've also said that you've got your own podcast, and what's that about particularly? Is that actually following your journey itself?
It is. It's following the journey myself. So anyone who wants to sort of hear about the actual journey and the actual hike that I did, right, that podcast is still at the moment just on Spotify as well, Keeping the Sea on the Right. And that was a very raw, I just must say to your listeners who will be used to your absolute professionalism, but it's a very, very,
right.
No, really, if you listen to my podcast, it was very, very raw. So think howling gales, think me laughing,
it's the real
coughing.
Thing, though. It's the real thing. That's great.
It is the real thing. Yeah. And it started out just for family and friends, but it became much, much more popular. I haven't dropped an episode of that since I finished the hike, but as soon as I start my next big hike, which will probably be in September, I'll be straight back onto that podcast. Nice. And the other one, the 630 miles, I'm hosting that as a volunteer for the charity, for the Southwest Coast Path Association. And that's much more, I was going to say serious,
proper.
But it's not that it's, much more proper. It's not that it's serious. It's just, it is taking things more seriously, and we hope to interview lots of people about the history and heritage, about the arts, about creativity on the path,
nice.
People who walk the path and so on.
Well, I tell you, firstly speaking with Andy and then with you, it's certainly stirred an interest within me. So I want another trail. Well, I'm getting older. I want to go one. I don't think I can do another 2,500 mile hike, but I can probably do 600 miles, I guess, at some stage. So it's one that certainly is on my radar. Are there any other trails in the UK you're going to look into walk going forward?
It's a really good question, and one that I'm asked all the time. So I've cycled the coast to coast, but not walked it. So the coast to coast runs from the Lake District, west side of England, across to North Yorkshire. Actually, it's probably Northumberland.
About 100 miles?
It is about 100 miles, yeah. It is about 100 miles. Actually, no, I think it's a little bit more. I don't know. I should know, but I don't know. So that's an option. Obviously, we've talked about the West Highland Way. There's the Cotswold Way. I live just down the road from the Cotswold Way, which is a beautiful trail that runs inland. But do you know what? Because my name, my handle, my hashtag, if you like, is keeping the sea on the right, I kind of like the trails that run by some sort of ocean.
Oh, you got to get over that.
Well, do I? I don't know, do I? If you think about the world, the world is my oyster. There's a lot of trails.
Well, the sea will be on your left if you're doing the Portuguese. Are you going to go from south to north or north to south?
No, north to south. North to south. So the sea has to be on my right. Literally, I don't ever feel I can walk again with the sea on my left. And if I ever find myself walking with the sea on my left, which I did down in Cornwall the other week, I feel it's wrong. I feel like I'm doing it wrong.
That's hilarious.
Because I've got to keep the sea on the right. It's crazy.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to put links in the show notes to your Instagram, assuming that you're okay for me to do that.
Of course, yeah, thank you.
And also a link to both the podcast, the Spotify podcast, so people can have a little listen and see what they think about it. But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing the story with us, because I think it's such a fascinating part of the UK, part of England that I hardly ever went to when I lived there. Mm-hmm. And so it's lovely to hear about a trail that was in my old country as well. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. It's been great. And it's always good to talk to a fellow hiker. So, yeah, thanks ever so much.
Okay, take it easy, all right?
Thanks.
Cheers then.
Bye-bye. Bye.
To me, it really sounded like a nice hike to do. I love that part of England, though, as I've said, I haven't seen all of it. Funnily enough, my brother Mike and I are thinking about doing a 100, 150 mile hike in the next year or so. So maybe this could be the one. He could start it with me and I'll carry on till the end when he heads home. I'm adding links to Rachel's 2 podcasts, as well as her Instagram account and the Instagram account for the South West Coast Path itself. Just before we get on, I got an email the other day from one of our guests from 2 weeks ago. You'll probably remember Mike and Marla Hansen, where she supported his through hike in their van. Well, Marla wrote to me with what she referred to as another Mighty Blue story. She wrote that she'd heard from several people who downloaded and enjoyed our conversation. Then she went on and said, one of those early downloaders was Bob from Maine, our trail angel that got me to Katahdin. We were going to share it with him, but he's an avid listener and had heard it before we even got a chance to. He called Mike right away, said it made him cry, and invited Mike to hike Mount Kilimanjaro with him next year. How cool is that? Well, I personally think that's real cool. And once you hike, any hike, you are inextricably linked to that network of kind of like-minded people you've met out on a trail. And that link will sustain you for years. Now, after meeting Bob from Maine, they're linked with him. And next year, Bob and Mike are going to trek up Kilimanjaro together. I know you've heard me say this before, particularly when I got irked by a listener's comment, but this isn't just walking. Anybody who has immersed themselves in this community, and this has been true over many years, has felt the love, the compassion, and the feeling of togetherness that we're all invited to be a part of. It was so good, and for me, affirming to read that from Marla. Thanks. Now, the Mighty Blue class of 23 is hitting the trail. This Saturday, Steve Nota, or Dingo, picks up where he left off last year. Let's hear again from Steve.
G'day, Steve. How's it going, mate?
I'm good. Hey, Steve.
Yeah, good, thanks.
I had a few problems there with my headphones. So as I was about to introduce you, but I think we'll just get straight into it. You're our American from Australia, Dingo.
That's right.
So you're now in the US. So I think it might be a good idea to just catch up with what you did, how far you got last year, and what your plan is this year. So how far did you get last year?
Yeah, so did two sections. Springer to Franklin, really deep gap.
Yeah.
And then I rejoined the trail on Mother's Day last year at Harper's.
Right.
And got from Harper's to Bennington, Vermont in mid-August, rather.
Yeah, sure.
After taking some time off with my wife in July. I took the month of July off in the middle of that section. So about 650-ish miles I knocked out last year.
So the plan this year, I know, is to start from Franklin and go north on, I think it's the 1st of April, and you said a somewhat appropriate day.
Absolutely. Some would say it is.
Yeah. So when did you come over from Australia? When did you actually get here?
Yeah, I got here on the 16th of March.
Right.
So for the past 2 weeks, I've been visiting friends and family,
Nice.
tweaking gear.
Yeah.
As you do, as it gets close to the day, you agonize over, do I have all the right stuff?
Of course.
Let's tweak a little more.
Yeah.
But it's all laying flat. I've been walking around for every day for about 3 hours with my pack.
Interestingly, because you experienced it last year, you did 650 odd miles. What sort of changes did you make, and did you make it as a result of your experience last year?
Yes, I made changes, and yes, it was because of the experience, for sure.
Okay.
So, for instance, I started off last year with an Osprey pack.
Right.
And when I got off the trail the first time, two things happened. First, rookie mistake. I left a Cliff Bar in one of the pockets of the pack overnight. And of course, the pocket was destroyed by one of our local mice. Right?
Yes, of course.
But, so rookie mistake there.
Yeah.
But secondly, I said, gee, this pack is heavy. And I was seeing some other people with various other brands of, lightweight packs. So I joined that crowd. So I have a lightweight pack, initials of GG, and so the Mariposa, and it works out. Yeah, it's a very great pack. Very comfortable and very happy with, about 1.5 pounds off of my back.
And that always helps. Every pound helps. Did you find on the journey you did last year that you actually cut some weight then as well? And have you cut weight even further now, apart from the weight of the pack?
Yeah, well, I think we talked last time. Again, I started off with a lovely pair of leather boots, right?
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
And so now I have a pair, like Keens or Obos, that sort of brand. So, an extra pound off your feet certainly has made a big difference as well.
Right. So what's you say you're heading out on the 1st of April. Is the plan now to really get it done? In other words, to try to just stay on the trail until you're done? Because I know you had a break. Obviously, your mother wasn't well, and then you took some time off with your wife and so on. Do you feel now that you're ready for this thing to be done in almost one hit? I know it's two big sections. Is that what you're planning to do? Go to Harper's Ferry and then go from Bennington up to Katahdin?
That's correct. That's the plan for sure. So look, no doubt that the transit from Harper's to Bennington will take a couple of days.
Sure.
Expect that I'll take a day or two just to rejig my gear, because I'm thinking that I'm starting off with a lot of cold weather gear, so I'll be able to shed a little bit of the cold weather gear. I know, not because it still will be chilly in northern New England, even in, let's say mid-June.
Yeah.
It really isn't until July and August. I'm from that area, so I know that you can still have cool nights, heck, even in July,
So now you're starting April 1st, so we are hitting. We should be past the worst of the cold, although you can still get hit pretty badly by cold in April as well. And I was. We had snow in the Smokies on the 7th of April. Have you? I mean, what is the forecast for? You're leaving Saturday morning, so what's the forecast? You must have checked. You must be checking daily now.
I have been checking, and it's certainly going to be windy, and there's a slight chance of rain. I'll be slack packing Thursday and Friday around Franklin.
All right.
The shuttle guy who brought me to Asheville last year from Franklin, connected with him, and he's going to help me with a couple of slack packing days just to get myself back into it in earnest in the mountains. And then, on the 1st of April, head up to the NOC and then, all the rest.
Yeah. So are you, where's your head right now? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Or is this the thing, I just want to get this done now?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I want to get it done. There's no doubt that there's some apprehension. You're a year older and all the rest. But, I mean, and I don't want to say it that way, but you know how it is. I mean, God, to be honest, I'm crossing my fingers that no other wacky stuff happens along the way, that I will have the opportunity to go straight through without, having to react to issues off the trail. You know what I mean?
And is your wife still very, very much supportive with you doing this? She's over here now, is she, or is she still back in Australia?
Yeah, she's still back in Oz.
Oh, right. Okay. Right.
Yeah, she's very supportive of it. She knows. Look, we talk about the the post-hike depression thing, and we've had lots about it. And there's no doubt that the events over last summer and me coming back to Oz, really my life's been on hold since I got back from the state of Oz. So this is really unfinished business for me, and I'm very keen to knock it out. It's a lifelong dream. We've talked about this before, and by gum, yes, I am going to finish it come hook or crook.
And are you physically well at the moment? I mean, how are you? You say you've been doing the slack packing. I mean, and I know it's obviously easier, but it's just nice to get out there on a trail to see what it feels like under your feet and so on. Does it feel familiar to you? Because I know that when I went in 2019, it felt so much more familiar than it did when I went in 2014, obviously, because I was a complete newbie. And you're not a complete newbie on the Appalachian Trail this year, unusually for our class of 2023. Are you feeling, having been slack packing around, I presume you've been slack packing on the trail, have you?
No.
Oh, right. Oh, you haven't. Oh, right.
Well, I've been doing my training walks around, my friends' neighborhoods.
Oh,
and things
right.
Just trying to get in shape. You know what I mean?
As you probably know, not quite the same thing.
Ain't that the truth? I did redo the overland track down in Tasmania in mid-Feb with some of my buddies.
Nice.
So frankly, I'd done that same trail, 2 or 3 years ago before I did my bit on the AT. So going back to that trail, I felt really good doing it, and it kind of affirmed, first my fitness, and also that, I think I've tweaked my gear in a way that made that trek a little bit easier. So yes, to answer your question, I'm feeling more confident in the ability to knock it out. Look, just like anything, I'm not particular. I mean, I'm looking out here. I'm in, central South Carolina, and it's a rainy day here, and I'm thinking to myself, "Yep, that's going to suck." But it's going to happen, and I know it's going to happen. We deal with that.
Well, look, as always, wish you well. Hope it goes well for you. Get those first few miles under your belt, and then we'll talk. We'll talk again in a couple of weeks to see what your impressions are and what it feels like to be back on the trail. Okay.
Sounds great, man. Talk
okay,
then.
Take it easy. Okay. Have a good time. Cheers.
Okay. Bye.
I just love that accent. An America in Aussie. Steve had some real tough breaks last year, and he's accepted that his through-hike ambition isn't going to happen in 1 year, but he's okay with that, and he's determined to get it done this year. As always, we wish him well. Once he gets going, it's going to be interesting to learn if he sees the same trail this year or if he notices subtle differences. We'll catch up again with him soon. Just before Mary takes the stage, I wanted to address a couple of questions from Betty McInerney, who is not only one of our class of 23, but also a generous donor to the network. Betty wrote me the following. 2 for Dr. Lynn, she said. I haven't had any, but any advice on muscle cramps? Second, any insight on Raynaud's syndrome? So I put those 2 questions to Lynn, and she came back to me with this. Muscle cramps. Depends on what they're from. Usually make sure to stay hydrated well and make sure to keep up with electrolytes. You might need to slow down when you feel leg cramps, especially if going uphill and you are stretching your calf muscles. Raynaud syndrome. I actually have that syndrome myself. It's very important to start off with warm hands and feet before you start your day. Make sure to keep mittens on. Gloves are not as good because they separate the fingers, and fingers help keep each other warm. I often get cold hands for the first 15 minutes if I'm hiking in winter, but once my body core temperature starts warming up, the blood flow to the extremities is warmer, and then the hands and feet become nice and warm. Biggest problem is when I stop for a rest and need to access something in my backpack. I will need to remove my mittens, and then the fingers are exposed to cold temperatures and become tender and painful. So I can't keep mittens off for more than a few seconds. It's a real problem, and the main reason I do not backpack in the winter. Also, make sure to keep hand warmers in mittens, especially in the first part of the day. Well, I'd never even heard of Raynaud's syndrome, so it was good to read and get a bit more of an understanding. Also, and I'm actually not sure I forwarded this yet to Betty, Lynn followed up by saying, and please pass along to her that if she needs any help east of Bear Mountain in New York and in all of Connecticut, she can get in contact with me and I'll be glad to assist at whatever I can. What a gal. Thanks, Lynn, and thanks for the questions, Betty. Now, let's hear how Mary Marks and her dog, Wiley, are getting on.
Hello, Steve.
Hey, Mary, how are you?
Oh, well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm very good, thanks. And it's been a bit of a mission for you and I to record, but we're speaking now on Saturday, the morning of Saturday the 25th at 6:31 a.m. So it's pretty early. We've tried to speak a few times. It hasn't gone well. The last time we actually spoke, we recorded was you were in Franklin. So you're a long way further than that. So tell us where you are now.
I am in Roan Mountain, Tennessee.
Right.
It's almost mile 400 for me, so I'm pretty excited about that.
I bet you are. And what you've just done, I know the last couple of days, we tried to speak, I think it was 2 days ago when you were in Roan High Mountain Shelter. And tell us about, because it's one of my favourite parts of the trail, that, by the way, going down the hill there and getting to Carver's Gap and then across those magnificent balls. Tell us about that.
Oh, it was beautiful, Steve. You just coming down Roan Mountain, it was quite icy, so it was a bit challenging.
I bet. And
the balls are just amazing, when you go up Little Hump and then Big Hump,
yes.
And you can see, I could see where I spent the night before at Grassy Ridge.
Right.
Because I hiked up there after I spoke to you, and
yes.
I wanted to see the sunrise.
Ah, beautiful.
Just absolutely gorgeous. Yes.
Yeah. So is it? Are you by yourself most? Well, obviously you're with Wiley, your dog, but are you by yourself generally with your hiking?
Pretty much. That's the interesting part about going slow and steady. You meet so many more hikers.
I'm sure.
This is like maybe a third or fourth group since I started that I hike with for 2 or 3 days, and then they move on. You meet at shelters and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I'm meeting so many more people, and it's been so fun.
Yeah, I was giving a presentation the other day, and I said to people that, trail families come and go. Embrace that. It's a lovely thing. You meet so many different people, and you're doing exactly that, aren't you? And I'm sure that one of the great things for you, the biggest attraction for people, of course, is Wiley. I'm sure he's the friendliest dog, isn't he?
He is, and I'm finding he's becoming a bit of a therapy dog on the trail. People want to pet him and hug him because they're missing their dogs at home.
I'm sure. Yes, that's true. Yeah, I guess. And is he still coping well with the trail?
He is. He is. We did a couple big days for us, 14, 15, 16-mile days. And I could tell after about 12, both of us being a bit tired. But, the next morning, as soon as he sees his leash and his harness, he's like, let's go. I think he's still having fun.
All right. Well, that's the important bit, and I'm sure you look at him every day and you think to yourself, is he okay today? Or is this something that you're quite confident that right now he's actually just absolutely enjoying it?
I worry about him every day, making sure that he's eating enough and getting enough sleep. I think that's the biggest thing, his sleep. Dogs need so much more sleep than we do.
Yeah.
And I think he's getting that, because once we get to camp, he helps with no chores. He just curls up and goes to sleep.
And where have you been sleeping? Have you been sleeping in your tent or are you in the shelters?
Well, I was one to think I would never want to sleep in a shelter until I was in the Smokies without him.
Yeah.
And, of course, with some bad weather, I started sleeping in shelters when there weren't a lot of people.
Yeah. And how was that?
I did well in there. I was surprised. It was much easier getting out in the morning because it takes me quite a bit of time.
I'm sure.
To get out of camp. But with Wiley, I prefer to stay in the tent.
Yeah,
more comfortable.
Because not everybody really wants a dog around. So I can understand that in many ways. Right. So you've got to look out for that. Obviously, what was the height? What was the height like in the Smokies compared to hiking with Wiley? Because of course that's two separate hikes, isn't it? Really,
it is. It was much easier, to be honest with you. It's a challenge hiking with a dog only because of their needs. And it slows you down,
Yeah.
I need a drink, and then he needs a drink. Well, with his drink, if there's not a stream nearby, you got to get out his bowl, fill up his water, carry more water.
Yeah.
So, it's a bit challenging, but I tell you, I'm hoping he can make it the rest of the way with me.
You're sounding like that may not be the case. Has your thought process changed since you started? Because when we spoke about it before, you said, well, if he's got to go home, then he's going home and I'll carry on. Do you still feel the same way?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. If I feel that his health is being compromised or he just isn't enjoying it.
Yeah.
He will go home.
No, I meant, would you then carry on? That's what I meant, because you said before you would.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, yes.
So what is it about, Mary, you obviously had thoughts about this before you did it, and you've obviously done quite a bit of hiking over the years. And what is it about this journey that you're enjoying so much?
Oh, you just never know what's around the next corner.
Yes.
You don't know who you're going to meet, the little towns that we're coming into. The landscape is starting to change. It's just beautiful, Steve. You've been there a couple of times, and it's just so intriguing to see these mountain ranges and these bogs and the weather changes. When I went over Big Bald, it was covered in snow.
Wow.
It was just magnificent.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's the beauty of our country, that places that you get to see that no one else can see unless you walk there.
Absolutely. It's the reward you get for all the sweat, blood, sweat and tears to get to the top of the mountain, isn't
it? Exactly. And there's plenty of that.
So you've done some of the kind of highlights already of the trip. You've done, obviously, the Smokies, you've done Hot Springs, and you're coming up to Damascus pretty quickly. How was Hot Springs for you?
Yes. Hot Springs was very nice. I think just 2 days there, slack packed. But the hike from Hot Springs to Irwin through North Carolina, Tennessee, you know how it weaves in and out. Beautiful section.
I agree. I've recommended that to people. I recommended that to people to do the Hot Springs to Irwin. I think it's a great little hike. Yeah, real nice.
It is. The trail's so well maintained, and it's an easy trail. It's like a walk through the woods, and the views are beautiful. I really did enjoy that section quite a bit.
And I know you just mentioned slack packing, which is absolutely the way to go as far as I'm concerned. Did you you had a bit of a problem one of your early slack packings, didn't you?
I did. In Franklin, decided to slack pack and wanted to go to Wyabald Fire Tower.
Uh-huh.
And come to find out, the road that my support person was going to pick me up at was closed. Unknown to me, they're closed from January to April 1st.
Wow.
So ultimately, I did 10 extra miles that I didn't have to do.
Oh.
But learned that lesson. So, check those forest roads if you're not using a local shuttle.
Yes.
If you have someone coming to visit you and want to slack pack, make sure you know what roads are open or closed. So, yeah, that was quite a lesson.
You know what? I was just about to say, lessons you learn on this trip. Do you find yourself improving as a hiker as well?
Oh, absolutely. Because every time you're out there, you learn something new.
Yeah.
The smallest of things. And then you also remember the little bit of information that other hikers have given you.
Oh, yeah.
Come true. And I'm really referring to the Woods Hole weekend. I learned so many things from all of you presenters that are so valuable.
She's an unpaid advertiser here, by the way, everybody.
That's absolutely right. I recommend that weekend to everyone.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm glad it helped you out. I did wonder that. I didn't want to ask you, but now you've mentioned it, I kind of will. When you're on the trail, do you suddenly remember? You do actually do that, don't you? You remember things that someone's told you somewhere. It's been lodged in your mind, doesn't it?
Every day, yes. The smallest of things. And
it does feel a bit of a collaborative effort. Have you got you and I, we're of the later generation, let's say. We're one of the older generation. How you get on with the youngsters?
Oh, wonderful. But when I see them just trekking by me, I'm thinking, I wish I was half my age right now.
I don't. I absolutely don't.
Well, in respect to climbing up those mountains, yes, but otherwise, no, I wouldn't give up that experience for anything.
That's
but
right.
Yeah, they're very respectful to me. In fact, several of them have referred to me as Miss Poppins.
Oh, nice. I like that. Miss
Miss
Poppins is real nice. Yeah, that's real nice. Yeah. Well, Miss Poppins. How about that? Well, look, keep pushing on. You're going to be in Damascus soon, which I think you're going to love. And you've got the Grayson Highlands to come after that. You've got some wonderful things to see. I'm looking at my map now and I can see the things you're coming to. So look, just have a great day and enjoy yourself in these miles, because these are great times. You're really going to love them. All right.
I'm having a blast. Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure talking with you.
And we'll speak soon. Okay, take it easy then. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
She is a resilient woman, isn't she? She just keeps on putting one foot in front of the other. And, I'd not consider how much people who have their own dogs must be missing them when they're out on the trail. I mean, I'm scared of dogs, but when I met Wiley and Mary at the Woods Hole weekend, he was so gentle that there's even a picture of me petting him somewhere on some phone. He was that gentle. And while I didn't ask her to say anything about the Woods Hole weekend, I was pretty glad that she did, especially when she shared that she got so much out of it. Thanks to those of you who have already taken advantage of the $100 off price that is still available until the end of April. It really is an investment on your hike that will, like Mary, be helping you along your way when a problem comes up on your hike and you think back to what I may have said or what Jester or one of the others may have said in that 13 or 14 hours of video from the weekend. You can still get it at hikingradionetwork.com website under the Woods Hole weekend. There's even a trailer to give you a flavour of the thing. Just before then the hail came, thanks as ever go to our wonderful donors. This week our monthly donors Jessica Diaz, Hugh Eckrath, Justin Mullins, Kevin Eastman are still supporting us, while Molly McCarthy and Sandra Eastman both stepped up as generous donations. Thanks to you all. Now, literally as I was writing this, I saw a post pop up on Facebook that I feel I should share with you. It was about the tragic news that one of our class of 2019 brothers, Ray Crobel, or Sparky, had passed. I didn't meet Ray, but he hiked with my friends, Cushy and Sharktooth, towards the end of his hike. I was lucky enough to interview him on the show last March, and he came across as a genuine warm bloke who relished his time on the trail. There's not much I can say, but I will add a link to our interview in the show notes. Rest in peace, brother. So, I'm going to leave you all this week with another guy's journey. George Stefanos is moving slowly towards home and rest and family connection that he needs. I'll see you next week. Saturday, the 30th of July 1983, mile 1316.5. When I was in Delaware Water Gap, the televised weather report predicted no chance of rain until late Saturday night, at the earliest, giving me the freedom to spend last night on that observation platform with no protection from the elements. Last night, at 2:15, the rain came. The winds intensified throughout the night, gusting powerfully at times. When the first raindrops splashed off my face, I came awake instantly. Initially, I just lay there, hoping that it was merely a few stray sprinkles. A steady rain began to fall. Jumping out of my sleeping bag, I threw all my gear inside my backpack and put the rain cover over the pack. I pulled my tent from out of its stuff sack and stretched it out above my sleeping bag myself with the waterproof floor facing the rain. I lay there, miserable, wondering what I'd got myself into, until the rain stopped after 15 minutes. Fortunately, the wind continued to gust and everything was dry 10 minutes later. I went back to bed and slept through the remainder of the night. Thanks to the sleep lost during that little episode, I had a rather late start in the morning, hitting the trail at 7:15. The Appalachian Trail, which had been following the crest of Kittatinny Ridge roughly northward since it entered New Jersey, coming within a few miles of its northern border with New York, now swung towards the east, descending finally from the mountain. After more than 150 miles of coping with the rocks, thorns and insects of Blue Mountain Kittatinny Range, I was more than happy to leave it behind. I lost the trail right at the beginning of the hike and blew 10 minutes before finding it once again. The blazing has been very iffy in New Jersey. Most of the time it's been fine, but every time that the trail route becomes obscure and I find myself needing the blazes, I can't find one. With all the blowdowns and the chaotic overgrowth which must have predated this long drought, I'm starting to suspect that the southern Appalachians were not the only portion of the AT which saw some wild storms this spring. I reached High Point Shelter at 7:45 and left at 8, after quickly sucking back 3 pints of water and refilling my water bottle. The stream at the shelter was dirty and the water didn't taste very good, but it was the last shore water on the Appalachian Trail in the state of New Jersey. A brand new trail relocation just past the shelter removed a long paved roadwalk from the AT. At first, the walking was easy and the trail was well cleared. A gentle downhill from the ridge crest was followed by a stroll along level terrain through a pleasantly cool forest. The rocks had finally disappeared and I had smooth sailing. After a while, the trail began to cross overgrown fields. The route was marked with stakes as tall as a man. Unfortunately, the weeds were taller, making it difficult to stay on the trail. Briars were scattered throughout the other weeds, so I left a little more of my blood behind on the Appalachian Trail. The trail began hopping over a series of low ridges. New Jersey must have purchased an extremely narrow right-of-way for the AT through this stretch, because the trail never deviated 1 degree from the direct route up those steep slopes. The heat and the humidity steadily increased as the day went on, and the trail gradually worsened. In spite of all these factors, my stamina had returned, and I was flying along. The signs looked very promising for the 1 big mileage day that I needed. A few miles along the trail from High Point, I caught up to a fellow thru-hiker. He told me he had just recently retired from his job, although he didn't look to be much older than 50 to me. He was spending the first summer of his retirement hiking the Appalachian Trail. He had started from Springer Mountain about a month and a half before I did, but a bout of pneumonia had laid him up for 2 weeks in Hot Springs. He's hiking well now, however, and I give him a good chance of reaching Katahdin. You must give him credit for some strong determination to have overcome all of that. One thing that impressed me about the man was something he said when we were discussing the problem of finding potable water in this portion of New Jersey. I mentioned that I was planning to get water from houses and from any stores or restaurants I passed. He smiled and told me, "I never pass a restaurant." Now this was a man after my own heart. A couple of miles later, the Appalachian Trail crossed Lot Road. I turned off the trail to follow it north into Unionville, New York. Although I was still 20 miles from officially entering New York, this village was less than a mile off the AT. This section of the trail very closely paralleled the state line. I stopped at the village grocery store for some munchies. During those waterless camps the preceding 2 nights, not having enough water with which to cook, I was compelled to make dinners from my supply of solid food. Now it was time for me to restock some of those items. I ran into 3 more through hikers at the store. One was that fellow Tom and I had met yesterday at Worthington's Bakery. He had stayed at High Point Shelter last night. I was glad that I did not, after he told me that a throng of weekend campers had hogged the shelter. The 5 or 6 real backpackers who showed up were forced to pitch tents. Despite about 15 bad minutes when that shower blew by, I enjoyed my stay up on the observation deck much more than I would have appreciated camping amid that horde of people. All 4 of the through hikers I met today were likeable guys. The other 2 men were presently travelling with that gentleman I'd met on the trail this morning. One was a dark-bearded man in his late 20s from Allentown, Pennsylvania. The other guy was in his early 30s. He had grown up in Kansas, lived for about 8 years in Southern California, and was presently residing in Maine. Talk about culture shock. I spent an hour at the store, feasting upon a pint of chocolate ice cream, a litre of Coke and a box of Cracker Jack, a small deviation from my usual routine which I had bought on a whim. I shot the breeze with the other through hikers for about 45 minutes, and then with the older guy I had passed earlier for the last 15 minutes before I left. He showed up just as the other 3 were leaving. As I walked back to the AT, I filled my canteen from a water fountain I passed in the town park. Once I had returned to the AT, it followed an old railroad grade for a while. At first, the trail was beautiful, a wide, clear path through the surrounding tall weeds. The weeds gradually closed in upon the trail until the final half-mile along that railroad grade was another virtual bushwhack. This one was teeming with thorns and poison ivy, which were unavoidable due to the condition of the trail. Perhaps I should have put on my long pants and my long-sleeved shirt, but it was a singularly unappealing thought as the temperature climbed through the 90s. I was soon bleeding as freely as I had on any stretch of the AT on Blue Mountain. A few miles later, the Appalachian Trail began the first of 2 long road walks today. I enjoyed my usual road walk weather of soaring temperatures, choking humidity and merciless sun. This stretch of simmering blacktop was only 2 miles, but seemed longer. Not a single shade tree lined the road, not a single store or restaurant to stop for a cool drink. Nothing but farms and fields of vegetables crisping beneath a harsh, glaring sun. The water in my canteen became bath water. My stomach writhed and squirmed every time I swallowed a gulp of that nauseating liquid. It was all I could do to keep it down. I guess that now would be a good time to talk about the slight problem with water in this part of New Jersey. There isn't any. As I've mentioned, the stream up near High Point Shelter was the last water fit to drink on the AT in this state. I passed a few stagnant, muddy streams in the valley, but the drought has rendered them undrinkable. This is all farming and grazing country, so the water would probably give one the trots even without this drought. Fortunately, the Appalachian Trail passes a lot of houses in this section. I hate to bother people, but I do not have much of a choice. I need water. Following that miserable road walk, the Appalachian Trail went back into the woods and began the climb over Pochuck Mountain. According to the Philosopher's Guide, this mountain is absolutely infested with hungry mosquitoes, but I didn't find this to be the case during this hot, dry summer. That is just about the only good thing I can say about that damned hunk of rock. I came to a junction of 2 woods roads right at its base. I could see no blazes on either road. I knew I was supposed to be climbing, so I selected the one leading straight uphill. 10 minutes later, I knew I'd chosen wrong. I still had not seen a blaze, which was too long to follow the AT without seeing one, even during this hostile summer. I collapsed onto the ground for a 10-minute rest before backtracking to that road junction. I felt giddy and nauseous from the heat. When I got back to the junction and began to follow the other road, I finally found another blaze. It was 100 yards up the road, cleverly hidden behind some bushes, invisible from the vantage point of the road junction. The Appalachian Trail flowed woods roads for most of the distance to the summit, and the climb was decently graded. The last 1/10 of a mile went straight up a slippery rock slide and then climbed steeply over rock outcrops from which there were no views. I was compelled to collapse upon the ground for another breather at the top, and time was now working against that big day for which I was trying so desperately. My one last chance to make up some time was on the 5-mile road walk which followed the descent from the mountain. I flew over that road walk, stopping only once. That was when a lucky occurrence gave me the opportunity to acquire some water. As I was walking along, I saw a large German Shepherd mix sprinting towards me, barking and growling as if he was about to have me for lunch. Many people would have probably panicked and ran, but I know dogs. I noticed from a long way off that he was wagging his tail frantically as he ran, and he looked friendly. Betting that I'd guessed correctly, I bent down to pet him as he approached. I was right. Like so many other dogs, he was just a big bozo at heart. His owner was outside in the yard, and he came running over to tell me that the dog would not bite. I'd pretty much already figured that out from the way he was licking my face, the dog that is. The man was obviously relieved by my reaction. Don't I just know that feeling? So I took the opportunity to ask him if I could get some water. He took my 6-quart water bag and filled it from his garden hose. In 10 minutes I drank more than a half gallon, filled my water bottle and dumped the rest over the top of my head. I could have sat there for an hour, but I needed to put some miles behind me. The air had a lovely ambience of Midwestern coal-burning power plants and northeastern factories, all trapped beneath a sprawling, lifeless bubble of dead, steaming, tropical high pressure. Slowly dehydrating vegetation contributed its own musky fragrance to the flavourful cauldron, but the pièce de résistance of the mixture had to be a 3-mile-long, 3-inch-wide strip of liquid cow manure lining the edge of the road towards the end of the roadwalk. I had no idea of where it came from or how it might have gotten there, yet there is nothing like the smell of cow dung frying on hot tar to make you happy to be alive. I arrived at the end of the roadwalk and the beginning of the climb up Wayawanda Mountain, early enough to be on schedule for that one long day I needed. I was feeling a real sense of elation at having beaten all the obstacles of another miserable July day. The mountain had been visible across the valley during most of the roadwalk, and it was not large. I anticipated little difficulty. I anticipated wrong. I'm firmly convinced that the climb over Wayawanda Mountain was one of the nastiest climbs on the entire Appalachian Trail. Certainly it was one of the worst for a mountain of its size. For almost a mile, the AT went straight up one rock slide after another. I was compelled to keep stopping in order to catch my breath, something that I never do anymore. My heart was pounding right out of my chest, and my head felt as if I was experiencing a cerebral hemorrhage. The adventures in sadism continued even after the trail had attained the ridge crest. I climbed over some awkward boulder formations, and then the trail dropped steeply off the edge of the ridge for 200 feet and immediately straight back up. I was a physical wreck by the time I had made it to the top. It was 7:30. I had one more usable hour of daylight, and my quest to reach Graymore Monastery in 3 days had failed. That psychic storm, which had been receding from my horizon all day, now broke with full fury. I plodded along, yelling profanities at the top of my lungs. Eventually, a small piece of myself seemed to break free, move off a few feet, and take a long, hard look. It told me that I was done. The long weeks of mining the deep vein of my reserves had finally come home. The vein was spent, the well was dry, the chickens were coming home to roost, and I was mixing metaphors rather horribly. I was not only physically played out, but also emotionally and mentally spent, and I was still slightly more than one state from home. I ran into Tom again, camped just past the ridge crest on a quiet grove of hemlock along the bank of what used to be a stream. The drought had converted it into a few small mud holes scattered across the strip of sand and rocks. Less than 5 minutes later, the AT passed within 20 feet of the backyard of a house. I knocked on the door and they agreed to let me fill my water bag. I brought the water back to the hemlock grove and pitched my tent beside Tom's. We talked for a while as I made dinner, mostly bitching about that final climb. Dinner was ready just as darkness was falling. I ate inside my tent to escape from the swarms of mosquitoes which were attempting to make us their dinner. I managed to slip quickly inside with only 3 of them following me, so it only took 5 minutes to kill them all before I could relax. After all the struggles and promise of today, I only managed 20 miles. I feel as if I've hiked 30. My gamble to hike these long days has severely backfired. I put a beating on my body attempting to get in one extra long day out of these past 3. Now I'm as run down physically as I've felt on this entire trip, and I've failed to get that one big day to show for it. I was beginning to feel as if I could do anything if I tried hard enough. I guess that I was wrong. Pennsylvania simply did too much damage to my feet, and the sweltering days throughout this past month have drained my reserves dry. In addition to feeling physically drained, I'm now running on empty emotionally. I need that visit to my home in Connecticut now more than ever, and I will have to wait an extra day. That feels like forever. My immediate problem now is to somehow find the strength to hike merely normal days and to rediscover my excitement for the Appalachian Trail. If I cannot accomplish that second objective, my guess is I will never see Katahdin.